Yo, what is up guys, Dimeo's back with a brand new video, and we're back on some more Call of Duty World War II. In this video I actually wanted to talk about something specifically, and it's a little bit more of a serious topic, although I don't want it to be really that serious. I kind of want it to be a joke. I don't want this video to be like sad or something like that. Like, I want it to still be, you know, a Dimeo video, as if I've never uploaded sad videos in the past. Yep. Now, as you guys may know if you've been watching me for a while, in a lot of my videos I tend to include jokes that talk about my father and how he left me and how he's not around anymore. And I thought about it for a few days and I was thinking to myself, like, you know, maybe some people don't understand why I make these jokes. Some people might not understand the relationship I actually had with my dad, and so I kind of wanted to make a video clearing that up. And before we get into it, I just want to put out there that I'm not making this video for sympathy. I don't want anybody to feel bad about me, because honestly, it's the past. It doesn't really matter that much anymore. It's not a huge deal. It doesn't really affect me in my personal life that much, so I don't need you guys to like feel sorry for me or anything like that. I kind of just thought this would be an interesting video because I like to be personal with you guys. I like to talk about a lot of shit that is personal to me, because I don't really like keeping secrets on my channel. Of course, there are some things I literally cannot talk about because I might actually get in trouble. But when it comes to a topic about my dad and what happened with me and him, I don't really feel like it's a problem talking about it. As long as I'm okay with it, I'm gonna make a video with it. If I wasn't okay with talking about it, I just simply wouldn't make a video. You guys don't need to feel sorry for me. I just thought I'd make this video just for the sake of it, because some people might be a little bit confused as to why I make these jokes sometimes. So I'll take you guys back all the way to, I don't know, 2002, 2003-ish. At the time, I was around 2 or 3 years old, and I still had my dad around. I'd say when I was about 4 years old and up is when I start to remember a lot of the things. And just as a baseline, my dad was around up to, I'd say, about 6 years old. That is the best I can remember he was around. I'm almost 100% sure he was around until I was 6 years old. And me and my dad, from what I remember, we did have a good relationship, but that's not really the case. That's what I thought it was, maybe because I didn't know any different. But according to my mom, my dad actually doesn't care about me. He didn't actually give a shit about me. He never went out of his way to come and visit me. It was usually me and my mom, you know, doing about our business, and she'd probably, you know, live with me in some sort of apartment or something. And he never went out of his way to actually visit me, or even talk to me for that matter. From what I remember, the only thing I remember of me and my dad is the only times we really had any sort of bonding experience, or any time that we actually talked, was when I was in his house. Which by itself, I don't really think was that common. I don't really think I was actually at my dad's that often. I was probably living in my dad's house for a few years, but I'd say from about 4 to 6, I was mainly living with my mom, as my mom was having a few hardships with my dad. And things kind of started to get worse and worse after I was born. Eventually, over time, my dad kind of just didn't really give a shit about me. I would start to see him less and less, to the point where I kind of grew up without a father even in those years. I'd say from about 4 to 6 years old, I didn't really have a dad around. He was still there, you know, once in a while if, you know, he came to pick me up from school, which wasn't very often. I remember there was actually this one time when my dad did come and pick me up from school. Normally, my mom would pick me up from school. I would say pretty much all the time my mom would be the one who would come to pick me up. But what happened is one day my dad ended up coming to my school and actually picking me up. And I remember this quite clearly. It had been a very, very long time that I had seen my father, and I was actually really, really scared of him, because my father, in case you didn't know, was actually a huge piece of shit. My dad didn't really care about me. He drank a lot of the time. He beat my mother up. He was very, very abusive. I don't know if he was abusive towards me. I honestly can't remember if he ever did anything to me. I can't remember him ever laying a finger on me, to be honest. I know that he was abusive towards my sisters and towards my mom. Like, he would proper beat the shit out of my mom. Like, my mom still has photos of her with like black eyes and all these like different cuts all over her face and stuff like that from when she was, you know, beaten up and abused by my dad. And my mom was dealing with this for quite a few years, actually. I think this had been going on for a long time. I don't think my mom got bet up and then just immediately, you know, filed divorce papers. I'm pretty sure she was dealing with this for a long time. My dad was always just kind of abusive. That's what my mom told me anyway. And I asked my mom, like, why did you stay with him if he was abusive? If he was doing all this shit to you, why did you stay with him? And she said that the only reason she stayed with him is so that I could have a father. Because she was kind of thinking of me. She wanted me to grow up with a father. And if my dad loved me and cared for me, she would have stayed in the relationship. She would have stayed married to him if that was the case, if he did actually give a shit about me. She told me that the only reason she divorced my father is because he didn't care about me. If she was being abused and was getting hurt and like all this stuff with my father, if he cared about me, she would have still stayed in the relationship. She wouldn't have filed the divorce papers. Which to me sounds extremely courageous of my mom. I really do appreciate that she took me into consideration, that in the end, that's all she really cared about. But at the same time, I'm kind of happy that wasn't the case. In that regard, I'm happy my dad didn't give a shit about me. I'm happy that my mom filed divorce papers just because he didn't care about me. Because I would prefer not having a father and my mom being safe than having a father that beats the shit out of my mom. To give you guys context of what exactly the abuse was like towards my mom, I remember there was this one story that my uncle told about where he kind of saved my mom. I don't exactly know what would have happened. I don't know if my mom would have died. I don't know exactly what would have happened. But I do know that she was extremely hurt during the situation. My uncle was telling me it was kind of like a party. A lot of people were drunk. Some people were drinking, and then my mom and my dad were at that party. Now, I wasn't there. I don't know where I was. I was probably with my grandmother or something like that. Probably with a relative. And what had happened that night is my mom was pushed into a room and my dad followed behind. And my dad closed the door and completely locked it. And he walked into the room with a baseball bat and started beating the shit out of my mom with a baseball bat. Now, when I heard this, I was extremely pissed off, and I still am pissed off about it to this day. The way this whole situation with him beating my mom up and, you know, with the baseball bat and stuff like that, the way that came to an end is my uncle was actually at that party, and my uncle was sober. And he tried to get into the room. Trying to get into the room wasn't as easy as just knocking down the door, because there was actually someone in front of the door blocking it so that nobody could walk in. But my uncle, what he told me is that he didn't care. He, you know, got the guy out of his way. I don't know how he did that, whether he had to fight the guy or it just pushed him out of the way. I don't exactly know. But I do know that he managed to get that person out of the way, took the door down, and he stopped my father from doing anything more. This one uncle that I'm talking about, the one that stopped my dad from hurting my mom any further, I appreciate him the most out of anybody else in my family besides my mom. I love my mom the most out of everybody in the family, but if I were to say who I love the second most, which I don't have like a specific list that I carry around to say like, oh, who I love the most in my family, but when it comes to the person that I appreciate the most in the family, the one who I take inspiration from the most, besides my mom, it's definitely that uncle, because he's just extremely brave, he knows what he's doing, and he's a really tough guy, and he's been through a lot, and I really appreciate what he did, because he potentially saved my mom's life. Who knows what could have happened that night? Who knows if my dad would have beaten my mom up to the point where something could have happened to her? What if she got brain damage or something? What if she got killed? You could definitely kill someone with a baseball bat. Like, a baseball bat could be used as a weapon. And even with all that, even with my mom getting abused to the point where she could have literally died, like my dad could have killed her, even with all that, she said that she would have put up with that if it meant that my dad cared about me, which doesn't make me happy. That's not what I would be happy with. I don't give a shit if I don't have a father. As long as my mom is safe, that's the most important thing. But anyway, eventually I think my mom was fed up with it, and I think she had enough, and I'm pretty sure we started to move out and get our own place so that we could stay away from my father. We obviously couldn't live with him. And my mom was still married to my father at this point. They were just living separately. What kind of ended the whole thing, and what I think was the last straw, is when it was very, very obvious that my dad didn't care about me. And I'm pretty sure my mom was already thinking of divorce as it was, because, you know, he didn't give a shit about me to begin with. He never did anything for me. But what also ended up happening is my dad also cheated on my mom. There were a few times, quite rare, that my mom would allow me to go and stay with my father. Because my mom knew that my dad wouldn't lay a finger on me. He, for some reason, just never hurt me. Which, you know, I'm glad. You know, I can't really say much about that. By the way, I forgot to mention this. That one time that my dad did end up coming to pick me up from school, what ended up happening is I started shaking. I saw my dad, and I was extremely scared of him because I knew that he beat my mom up. I knew that he was abusive towards my mom. I had seen this as well. There were other occasions where I saw my mom be abused, and so I was scared of him. And there was one day where he just came to pick me up from school, and when I saw my dad, I kind of froze, and then I started shaking uncontrollably, basically falling into a panic or anxiety attack, whichever one makes sense in that situation. As soon as I saw my dad, I just started shaking uncontrollably. I was so scared when I saw him. But what ended up happening is, I'd say this is when I was 6 years old, 5 years old, 6 years old. My dad would sometimes have me over to stay in his house. I don't know if he actually ever wanted me over, but I would stay in my father's house. Probably because my mom said you need to have him over sometimes just so that he can see his father. My dad probably didn't want me over, but it is what it is. And whenever I would go over to my dad's house, I would see him with a different woman. I didn't exactly know who this woman was. At the time, I didn't understand why my dad sleeping in the same bed with another woman was a big deal. I didn't know at the time that that was a bad thing. I didn't know what cheating was. I didn't know what relationships were. But I did see my dad, you know, kissing, sleeping in the same bed with another woman. And when I went home, just innocently, as if I were to talk about anybody, I told my mom, like, you know, daddy's at home with another woman. And my mom started asking questions like, is he sleeping in the same bed as her? You know, are they kissing and stuff like that? And I was like, yeah, they are. And I basically told my mom exactly who she was and what happened. And then pretty much as soon as I told my mom about this other woman, she, you know, she knew she was being cheated on, and she knew how much of a piece of shit my father was. Not only did he not care about me, but he abused my mom and also cheated on her. Was probably a borderline alcoholic as well. And what happened next is my mom told me to get dressed, and I did. I got dressed, and we walked over to where my father lived. And we basically just waited for his car to pull up in the garage. And as soon as the car pulled up in the garage, my mom was looking out the window of the apartments to see, you know, who was coming. As soon as we saw his car start to drive towards the garage, we went in the underground garage. We went in the underground garage to basically confront him. I was with her, and I saw everything that happened right in front of me, right in front of my eyes. And what ended up happening is my mom walked into the middle of the driveway where my dad was driving, and my dad stopped the car, and my dad was in the car with the woman that he was cheating on my mom with. And what my mom did is she got on top of the front of the car and kind of just sat on it and looked through the front window and kind of gave my dad a look of saying like, oh, you're caught and all this stuff. And while my mom was being really petty, I think it was completely justified for all the shit that he had done to her, everything that my mom had been through, and now she caught him cheating on her. And I thought that that was going to be the end of it. I thought that maybe he would get out of the car and they would start arguing or talking or whatever. But that's not what ended up happening. My dad actually started up the car again and started driving the car and kind of knocked my mom off of the car, and she fell straight to the ground. How much of a piece of shit do you have to be to do that? The amount of shit that he has done to my mom. He's not in prison. He is doing whatever the fuck he wants, and he got away with all of this. He was obviously brought to court. My mom had the option to put him in prison or not, but my mom chose not to. If I had the decision over what I was going to do with my father, whether or not I could bring him to prison or whatever, if I was able to call the shots of what should be done with him next, if the death penalty was legal in Ireland, I would give him the death penalty. I don't care what good he's done in his life. Everything that he's done to my mom is completely inexcusable. I'd want him to suffer, or I just want him fucking dead. I don't give a fuck who you are. I'm not tough by any means. I'm not a fighter, as I've stated in previous videos, but my mom is the most important person in my life. And if you lay a fucking finger on my mom, I'm going to kill you. And if I knew I couldn't get away from killing you, I would severely fucking hurt you, because you don't put a finger on my mom. My mom is the most important person in my life, and I won't stand for anybody doing anything to her. And that was pretty much it. At the age of 6, my mom filed the divorce papers, they split up, and that's the end of it. My dad never even contacted me ever again. I tried to contact him myself a few years ago, and I knew it was him. I could see his picture. I knew that he was the one texting. And when I ended up trying to call him, he didn't answer. And when I was texting him and I told him that I'm his son, that I want to talk to him, he pretended as if he didn't even know who I was. You know, one day I hope that I get successful on YouTube off of something that I completely love. You know, I'm doing my passion for a living. I hope I get to achieve that level of success. And one day, pop up to his front door and rub all of this success in his face and say, "You're a piece of shit and I did all this without you." I want to just show him that I did everything I wanted to do in life and I achieved all of my goals without his help, because he's a fucking piece of shit. But anyway, guys, that's pretty much the end of the story. That's everything that happened with my father. And as I said in the beginning of this video, I don't want sympathy. I just wanted to explain to you guys what was going on. And I'm sorry that this video was quite dark, actually. This might be one of the darkest videos I've ever made, period. And I'm, you know, a little bit sorry about that, but at the same time, I think this was a good video to talk about. I'm happy that I could share this story with you guys. The past is the past. It is what it is. I can't exactly change it. I would love to change the future, though, when it comes to him. But yeah, guys, that's pretty much the end of the video. I'll have my last one run up across the screen. If you haven't checked that out already, definitely make sure to check it out. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks very much for watching. Peace out.